Welcome back to High Wall Clean. This is Eric McCoy. I want to begin by expressing my great appreciation for our sponsor and taking a moment in the very beginning to let you know about this organization. It offers a lot of great services, including the school that I work for, as I get an opportunity to teach and assist in helping individuals become very competent and valuable counselors. How do you do this? Well, you've got to know more than other people do. New Creation College is located in Southern California, very close to the Ontario airport. This organization also offers extraordinary services for detox, residential, and outpatient treatment. And I'm also very excited to show our first professionally made commercial for this show. Now, I want you to stay tuned for our guest today, Amy Guerrero, who is a life coach and has created services that will help you heal your relationships, find a way out of stagnation in your program, and live a sober, confident life. And I'm going to see you in a minute.
People I love lost faith in me. I lost faith in me, and I lost my faith. I lost hope. I tried AA, but it just wasn't enough. I needed something that would help me for the rest of my life. I needed a nurturing environment that would help me understand what I was running from. His House New Creation gave me that. I found purpose, meaning, ultimately a career helping others. Recovery is a process, and I'm grateful for the journey His House New Creation helped me discover. True recovery really does begin at His house.
Trapped in a dream.
All right. Hey, I want to thank everybody for watching our show and supporting our show. This is, again, High Wall Clean. My name is Eric McCoy. As a lot of people know my story, I first entered the crazy world of recovery when I was very young, at the age of 16, after getting arrested twice and choosing rehab instead of juvenile prison. That was the first of many. And aside from not thinking I really had a problem, my crazy mind, somehow said that I won't take it seriously until I'm fully physically dependent and lose everything. I didn't exactly say that to myself, but it is what I did. Most of us, especially when we're younger, believe that life's going to be boring. It's going to suck. I'll never find enjoyment in life. And it was a belief that I carried that drugs, particularly meth, gave me confidence, gave me pleasure, and it made me more likable. Now, none of this was true, because as I title this High Wall Clean, pleasure comes from me. After a lot of years of destroying my body, I learned firsthand that what I was actually doing was slowly but surely taking all those positives that I felt meth gave me away. As times passed, I became less confident. Pleasure eventually faded, and I was far from likable, as I probably developed the same symptoms as antisocial personality disorder. The lies I told myself were killing me. Life did suck getting loaded. But I'll also admit that life did suck when I was newly sober, as the damage that I caused made all those negative things that I mentioned worse. I had deep depression. I hated myself worse than other people did. And I was far from confident. I struggled as I fought to stay clean. I eventually followed direction as I was told that all I needed to do was get a sponsor, work the steps, and go to meetings. They helped, and especially in terms of gaining a support network. But I did become stagnant, and I didn't feel that I was getting everything that I needed to become happy, to become confident and truly stable. I needed more. I worked hard on myself with self-esteem, caring about myself, and finding all those things that I felt meth gave me, but I was able to find them clean and sober. I found highness while clean. Now, my guest today is someone I would probably have loved to have found in my early years of recovery, because it possibly could have made life a lot easier as I had to sort of fumble around to figure all those things out. Amy Guerrero is a trauma-informed recovery coach. She's sober herself, and she's the founder of Thrive to Recovery, which is to help people heal trauma, help individuals find success, and create healthy relationships with people. Now, I see her as someone working at times to help people learn just the basic life skills that I believe are not really taught in treatment programs. Recently, Amy launched Bridge to Trust, which is a complimentary 3-day interactive experience designed for repairing relationships, heal dysfunctional family dynamics, and experience a deeper connection. Thank you, Amy. I want to thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure because we get to have pleasurable things happen in our conscious lives as people who choose sobriety and consciousness.
We get to get high.
We get to get high while clean. Yeah, I mean, I love every part of what you're about, and it's such an honor to be here and to have this conversation with you because, gosh, being high while clean is all about it. What it's all about.
Absolutely. I've read some of your stuff. I was kind of going over your website, and I feel that you and I are actually very like-minded. I realized that the 12-step program and kind of what I was seeing on your site, and I've said this over and over and over, and I say this to people all the time, that it only is going to get me so far. I always hated that saying that all you need to do, right, is get a sponsor, work the steps, and go to meetings. And I personally think that we're setting people up when we teach people that, because there's so much more that we need to find in life. You agree?
Oh my goodness, 100,000,000%. Yes, absolutely. And when I first walked into the rooms of 12-step and different types of recovery, I was willing to listen to whatever I was told. And so it can be so easily to get set up. Well, I'm doing the thing and I still don't feel happy, joyous, or free. What's wrong? There's something wrong with me, right? And that mentality can easily take over someone's life and then lead them back to that old groove, that old pathway that their body knows so well, to go back to the substance, to go back to the weird behavior, to go back to the porn, the sugar, the sex, the relationships that don't work. Sometimes it's not our drug of choice that we go back to, but we do find some way of escaping rather than really choosing. And I love that in your masculine, you use the word pleasure like you do, because, gosh, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad word. Pleasure is not a bad word.
No, nor is highness.
No. Yeah. Yeah. But we can be so afraid of it because we're told that we're going to die if we experience that, or if we have a desire to experience that while clean. And that can be scary. And especially for people who have the trauma response of black and white thinking, all or nothing thinking, which at first so many people do because their minds haven't been able to process that there can be grayness in their life and recovery, and that there can be fluidity, and the nervous system doesn't feel safe to feel that. And so that black and white thinking can be like, well, no, I can never have that thought again. And if I do, that means I'm headed down the road to relapse and I'm going to die. And, and I'm like, whoa, wait, none of that happened yet. You just want to have better sex. I mean, that's okay. Right. Oh.
Yeah, I think, and I've thought a lot about this, and again, the 12-step program's great, and it's helped a lot of people. And I encourage people to do it, check it out, see if it works for you, see if it helps you. But you definitely need more, I believe. And one of the things that I've thought about so much and working in the substance abuse industry, I've been doing it for, seems like forever, but often I'm like 20 years. And, I've seen so many people that they go to the 12-step program, they get the sponsors, they work the steps, they say, quote unquote, do everything that they're supposed to do. Then they get loaded and they relapse, and they go through this cycle. One of the things that I felt is probably their biggest downfall is they have no balance in their life. I mean, something I teach about all the time is balance. Anytime I feel overwhelmed in life, it's usually a result of my life being out of balance somewhere. And so many of those people go to 3-4 meetings a day. What else are you doing? I mean, what else can you be doing?
Yeah, 100%. And it feels so safe to do that.
Yes.
It feels so safe to go to 3 or 4 meetings a day because you're not using, right? But then you're not practicing living life either.
Mm-hmm.
You're living life inside the rooms of recovery, which is great. Everything that we hear in the rooms of recovery, other than it comes from the book, is all someone's subjective opinion from their unique experiences, history, and behavior. And oftentimes that can ignite old traumatic events from the persons that are in that room's life. And then they're like, I don't really know what happened. And I'm like, well, you've been to 4 meetings today. Something that you heard in those rooms activated an old trauma response in you. And you went running back to the old behavior. And to me, that makes total sense.
Right.
I mean, 80% of what we're doing in the world is neuroception, meaning that our bodies are taking it in, not our mind. And so sometimes we don't even know what triggers us. It's just like, well, I don't know. I feel like I want to die all of a sudden. And it could be something as simple as a scent in the air, a color, right? That just brings upon the body's response of protect, protect, protect. And listen, I mean, substances protected me from feeling my feelings for a really long time. And so they worked. And so if I'm activated and activated and activated with no other solution other than that one way of recovery, and I don't know how to handle those activations and those triggers when they come up, I'm going to go back to the old coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Because that's what my body knows how to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like, you kind of said that, when you're in meetings or you're talking to people in recovery, that they're telling, their subjective view, their view of their experience. And that's another thing that I think is missed on a lot, is teaching people to think for themselves. You go to meetings and you listen to people and it's like it's almost like reading the big book, but they're speaking it, and they just say the same things. They all say the same things. And I wish there was more emphasis on teaching that. How do you think for yourself? I mean, I've been in meetings before where I've heard people, I've got 30 years clean and sober and everything my mind still thinks is fucked up. It's like, that's what you've got?
Yeah. I mean, it's so real. I mean, you couldn't have put it better. And it's happening all of the time everywhere. One of the biggest things that Thrive in Recovery is all about is guiding people back to their truth, guiding people back to what you have known and always known. And sometimes it's this discovery process that means that we have to go in and dismantle the protective mechanisms that we've created in order to hide that pain or to hide what we've always known. So much of this stuff started when we were just little tiny people. And we very wisely create protective mechanisms to protect us to survive. And then we find substances or some other kind of behavior that helps us escape. And we forget that we knew before this pain and this trauma started happening. We come into this world all like, what's going to happen and ready. But if we don't have secure attachment from our families or caregivers, if we're not getting our needs met as little people, and we never learn how to, because we manage to get through surviving one day at a time, find some kind of behavior, drugs, alcohol, to really just push all of those feelings down. Then we stop using drugs, alcohol, or whatever those behaviors are, and then all those things come up at once. That can feel quite weird, overwhelming, and scary.
Yeah.
And then there's a bunch of us all in the same room talking about it with each other, and unknowingly, you're really not supporting each other to get into solution on how to actually move through those things, and then feel safe to experience pleasure again and get high while clean.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the feelings thing is always the most difficult for so many people. I mean, I look at my, methamphetamine for me, I did so much of it, when I was using, and I was an IV user. And I kind of said earlier that, I mean, I was literally like a sociopath in a sense that while on it, I feel nothing, and then, in 2002, it was a forced sobriety when they locked me up in jail. and guess what? Everything came up. I mean, I felt things that I don't know if I'd ever felt in my life. I mean, it was just, I felt so many emotions and feelings. I always kind of joke about it, but, I'd freaking start crying at a Hallmark commercial, I mean, just everything. And it was so horrific, and of course, coming off meth, you're in deep depression, as that highness is gone, I mean, the highness was gone while I was still using because we hit this adaptation level theory where, you do it so much that eventually it stops working. But, when you get off it, of course, you get to go even lower.
Yeah. Well, and your body's trying to figure out what to do with all of these, new sensations that are happening throughout the body that the brain hasn't been able to actually process, and the body hasn't actually been able to process. So yes, I mean, it's not the Hallmark commercial at all that you're crying about. It's like one of the weird things that maybe in a total blackout, or just you were just, off, out for 10 or 15 days and just not really remembering what was happening and totally numb. And you're like, I'm crying about something. And those are the things that can get so confusing, and that as the person that's feeling it, I know when I started to feel those things, I was like, oh my gosh, like, when is this going to stop? It feels permanent and pervasive while it's happening. And, I just want to remind everyone that's listening, like, it's not. It feels that way, and it's very real when it's feeling that way in those moments. However, once the body understands that it's safe to process this thing that's coming up, and that you don't have to necessarily relive it, because that's sometimes where we go wrong, is that we do this kind of immersive experience of making ourselves relive things that we've done. And that's not, in my opinion, the solution. Where we can do this much more gently and with so much more love and so much more safety, so that it can actually be pleasurable. And, my experience, Eric, wasn't very different than yours. When I figured out that I could no longer use alcohol, my favorite coping mechanism, which then meant that I couldn't use any of the other drugs that I was using. I mean, I was so chemically dependent on it that I just couldn't even have a sip without, like, the whole thing and my body just got so sick from it. And I was just like, I could not see a life where I was going to be able to regulate, or, just be able to live without that as in my body. I could not see it. And it was scary. It was really scary to go like, I've been using this for a long time and it's worked so well. I mean, it really did. It worked really well to manage me not killing myself or trying to kill myself sooner, honestly. I mean, it just did. It kept me nice and numb. I mean, for a few hours at least. The hangovers, all of that were not fun, but I was so highly functional. And then when I figured out I couldn't use it anymore, I was like, if these are my only options for recovery, and if this is what recovery really looks like, I don't want it.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather die. And I was unsuccessful. I would take all the perfect amounts of Xanax and alcohol so that I would not wake up. And somehow, some way, I would. And so I had to go really like scrape along the bottom there and some really pretty raunchy things for my body, for my family, for everyone to witness. No one knew that it was like even a thing. Like no one really knew I was depressed because I did such a great job of hiding it. I wore masks really well. So when all of this started happening, everyone was like, wait, what? Amy's totally fine. She's in San Francisco rocking it. She's got her own business. She's and then underneath of it all, that was not really what was happening. I had just been a master mask wearer, and it worked for a really long time.
Yeah.
And I knew that I wanted to feel pleasure in my conscious life. And that's why the last time I went to treatment, I was like, you've got to let me do things my way. Like, listen to me, please. Like, I have a plan. I want things to be different. And I'm willing to do whatever I have to do to check all the marks on your boxes.
Mm-hmm.
If you'll let me study, if you'll let me because I started writing my program the very first time I went to treatment in 2014. And then I started writing down like all of the different methodologies that I knew were going to support me to be able to be high while clean.
Yeah.
And I also knew that if I wanted to stay safe, the safest thing to do was to stay in recovery spaces that would keep me safe. So treatment for 30 days, sober living for 6 months, all the while started my business while I was there, right? Because I knew that that was going to keep me in a container of safety and structure so that I could do my own thing and figure it out. And that was such a big part of my journey to recovery. And I mean, I worked the steps, I did all the things because I mean, I really was like, I'll do everything
Mm-hmm.
and I'll try everything. I'm willing to explore it all. I won't necessarily be like indoctrinated, wherever that word is, into it, but I will like, yeah, I will listen. I will read the book and I will take from it what I want and I will leave the rest.
Sure.
And I was, after like, I don't know, 6 or 7 sponsors, I found someone who was really willing to meet me where I was at and at least walk me through the steps. And then I was like, okay, yeah. And there's like all this other stuff, right?
Right. So now you help other people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but there's so much more than that because that wasn't getting through the steps didn't
Right.
create happy, joyous, and free. There was still so much underlying trauma and so many weird behaviors and so much distrust in myself, so much emotional pain, no real idea how to show up in relationships,
Mm-hmm.
in integrity, like all the things, like all the lifey stuff that is, what takes people back out. It is so important to learn.
Yeah.
And what I noticed is that most of us didn't get the opportunity to learn this when we were younger because we just didn't have the space and the time to do that.
Too many drugs to do.
Too many drugs to do and lots of dysregulation in the households as well. Yeah.
One thing that I saw, and it was even the email that who was it that communicated with me? That was
Marie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, she had sent me a little bit of information. One of the things that really kind of stuck out and I really liked what she had put on there had to do with purpose, that, and this was probably one of the most important things for me was my entire life. That's what I didn't have. I didn't have a purpose. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I was doing. I was wandering aimlessly in life, running around with the Grateful Dead and, doing that whole, crazy life. And I didn't have a purpose. And when I got clean and sober, and I looked at myself, and then I also looked at all of the people out there that were happy, successful, clean and sober and enjoying life, was they all had a purpose. They knew they were going, what they were doing, how they were going to get there, and that's what drives us. Again, it's not the pain. People get sober because of what they don't want, but stay sober because of what they do want. And that's that drive that I think keeps us moving in the right direction.
Yeah. You're so right. And what I notice is that the world motivates us through fear.
Mm-hmm.
And there can even be this like pressure on like finding a purpose. Like, oh my God, you got to find your purpose. Well, fuck, where the fuck is it? Excuse me, am I allowed to say that word here? Yes. Did I leave it under a rock somewhere in my life? Is it under my bed? Like, did I leave it in my 20s? Because now I'm 40 and I'm just getting sober. Like, what is this purpose? And something that I just always bring people back to is like, what do you feel when you're doing things? Right? What really lights you up? Because if we continue to be motivated and inspired by fear of what we don't want, then we're not giving our body, our mind, our spirit the opportunity to enjoy the things that we actually do like. And something that I notice in people who choose recovery of any kind is that we have a very small tolerance for good. Like, because of the chaos, because of the things that we've endured, because of jail time or all of the different things, like there is a lot of tolerance for disorganization, and there's a lot of tolerance for pain, and there's a lot of tolerance for all these things. And when things are going well in someone's life, they're like, I don't know what to do. And then they'll often say, I'm bored. I'm like, oh, no, honey, you're not bored. Like, this is new. Right? Like, you are used to something blowing up right about this time, and you're going to blow it up. But what if we start to explore this beautiful feeling that you're feeling, that things are actually awesome right now, and you want more of these things, but it's scary because you've never had it before. And what emotions really drive you and feel good with you? And like, what do you know? What do you really truly trust within yourself? What truth is there to find from this place? And when you can consistently feel those things and allow that pleasure to be there, then that can give you those purpose feelings, how you want to feel. And then you create structure around it so that you can actually go out in the world and do the things. Because purpose, in my opinion, isn't outside of me. It's how I show up on podcasts. It's how I show up on lives. It's how I show up. Like, that's just me in my passion, in my, yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, this excites me. I got to interrupt you because I need to talk right now, right? Like, that to me is purpose within us. And sometimes it feels really unsafe to have that.
Sure. Yeah. Fear. I mean, you kind of, fear, it's sad when fear keeps us from doing the things that would be important for us to do, or things that we want to do. And you look at the pleasure side to it, and being clean and sober, and that concept that life's going to suck, life's going to be boring. I think that's the most ridiculous thing ever, because the truth being is that if I continue doing drugs, life's going to suck, life's going to be boring, because I'm going to be destroying my ability and destroying all those brain cells that are giving me the pleasure.
Yeah. And it's only about that. The way that I always put it is that when drugs or alcohol are our main coping mechanism, the only thing that we're really in relationship with is that.
Mm-hmm.
because everything centers around how do I get high so that I can have sex, so that I can go to work, so that I can, you know, be in a relationship with so and so, so that I can do this. Like the main relationship is between me and the substance.
Mhm.
Where when we take that away, then our relationship gets to be with all kinds of things. And we get to decide what we like and what we don't like and have agency again. Because when I was just always concerned about how fast can I get something inside of me to put between me and the world, that was my main event, right? Like I need a Xanax, I need cocaine. Oh, I'm going to go to the show. I need, ecstasy. I need this. I need that. I need much. I always needed something to enhance the experience. When we're choosing life without that, then it's like, oh gosh, like your choices get so much bigger.
Freedom.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Yeah, which can feel overwhelming, y'all. If you have only been relating to life through the lens of something between you and the world, having freedom will shut your nervous system down. It will collapse. It's like, oh, no, 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 that's too much. That's overwhelming. That's too much. I can't handle that. And so we don't do it all at once. We support the nervous system to start to feel safe, to grow into, okay, let's like give a little bit of freedom. The analogy that I like to give is that they've done studies with children playing in a yard, like a big yard, like a schoolyard. And if there's no fence around the schoolyard, then the children are all in the middle of the yard. But when there's a fence around the schoolyard, then the children are everywhere, playing everywhere because they feel safe, because they have those limits, those boundaries
Mm.
around them. And their nervous systems can relax and be like, okay, the teachers are right there, the fence is there, we can play everywhere.
Yeah.
But without that fence, they're all cuddled together, protecting one another.
Yeah. Yeah. After I'd served my time in custody, I was very fearful of getting out. I felt safe, inside, I felt that, I had a 7-year prison term over my head if I violated once I got out of custody. And I had a lot of fear that I was going to make the wrong decisions based on all my great decisions I made in the past. Right. And so, there was points in time where I was getting closer that I actually literally was hoping that I have a new case that'd be filed on me so I didn't have to leave because I had that fear, that I was, and again, I felt safe, which, in jail. My friend is, I got a really good friend of mine that's getting out in about a month. He's been in prison for about close to 6 years. And he's actually going to be moving in. He's going to move into one of my rooms for a little while, to kind of help him get back on his feet. And, we've been communicating a lot, and that's, where he stands too. He's like, I'm a wreck, and, most of, you kind of think like, oh God, it'd be so great to get out of prison, but
no, it's scary.
It's very scary.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, that's one of the many problems with our systems, right? Is that then we don't do anything to support your nervous system, his nervous system, into what I call reentry. Anytime we have any kind of break from our real life, whether it's treatment, even when it's on vacation, even when we go on vacation, it's like kind of scary to go back into life because all the things that will be waiting for us there. And can we go slow? Can we create systems? Can we naturalize it, make it normal? Right? Like it's so important, and it's not something that we do well. Definitely not in our prison systems, which I have such a big part to support more, especially because everyone in prison has some kind of trauma. Every single person. And it's just proven over and over and over again. And
The chances of them going back are good because
oh, yeah.
For a lot of reasons, but one being, if you get somebody that's been in prison for 6 years, 10 years, 15 years or whatever, and they get out and they don't have support, they're financially struggling, they need food, they're going to resort eventually back to what they knew. which is what they were doing before, which could be selling dope, or it could be, doing different things like that, which is going to put them right back, into the system.
Absolutely. And that's what I remind people of, is that our nervous systems are designed to keep us alive, not to thrive. They're just designed to keep us alive. So when we're in fear and we don't have any access to the smarter parts of our brain, then we act out of the older reptilian parts of our brain. Those grooves that are paved in the old part of our brain are going to take us to the path of least resistance. And that path of least resistance usually includes our old behaviors in some way, shape, or form. Right. And so if as a woman who does this work, I can still find little tiny ways, very subtle ways, where I'm like, wait, what am I doing here? What just ignited this old pathway? I mean, I'm not doing anything, that's going to hurt me, but it's still a part of that old pathway that I'm just very aware of. And I'm like, oh, wait, something as silly as I really was enjoying almond butter, and I got into this habit of just eating it right out of the can or the container. And I was like, this pathway is leading to something that is so high sensation that it's numbing that pathway for me. And I become unconscious while I'm eating it, and I'll eat too much, make myself kind of sick. And I just was like, I need to eliminate the almond butter from my life. Now, it's very subtle, and this is like a great problem to have as someone who had problems that were much deeper than this at some point. But I'm so glad that I had the awareness. And it was hard to give it up, because I was like, oh, and it feels so good. It's so pleasurable. But I was overdoing it. That old pathway just like kicked back in, and
you were eating almond butter?
Yeah, out of the can. Yeah. And it was just like not good for me anymore. It wasn't working, but it was something that was hurting me. And I'm like, it's so clearly a part of that pathway that once I start something, I just want to sort of numb. And the almond butter was acting as a numbing agent. I was like, this isn't pleasurable anymore. Like, there's a big difference between, like, I'm going to have one. Now I make them into these little fat bites, and they're so good. And I can have one, and it can be so freaking pleasurable. But then just eating it like straight out of the can. And we do that with sugar. We do that with porn. We do that with sex. We do that with cigarettes. We do that with caffeine. We do that with all kinds of different things. But it's that same pathway that's getting ignited in some way that's just like, I just want to shut down. And I can think of many more healthy ways for me personally to kind of check out and go play in the pool, or go do something, go for a walk, go talk to the hummingbird friends that just came back, just do something that's more pleasurable, that isn't taking me back to that old pathway.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing I always think about, and I think that, I know I've said this on my show before, but, with, recovery, and what is recovery? What are we recovering from? And, everybody always says it's a lifetime thing, that we're dealing with, in terms of the recovery process. And when I look back at my life, I've sort of felt that, the recovering for me, and a lot of it is recovering from grief and loss, even in the context of the drug, meth for me was my first love. That was, you always say everybody wants to go back to their first love, right? Methamphetamine, that was my first love.
Yeah.
And, and so I look at it even today. Do I miss it at times? Yeah. Does it pop in my head at times? Sure. You get a little tired and you're like, oh yeah, get a boost would be great. You kind of, start rationalizing, manipulating yourself a little bit. And that's something, I think that was probably the most important thing for me to really look at, was to address that grief and loss, Now, of course, I let go of that to gain back the other things that I lost, such as myself, my love for self, my self-esteem, my family, jobs, everything under the sun, and so that's what was very important for me, was to let go of that so I could gain this back.
Absolutely. And what you said is just so true. So what's underneath all of it is the unhealed emotional trauma, right? So the grief is such a big part of the process.
Yeah.
And often we're grieving the childhood we never had. We're grieving the things we wish we would have done in our 20s. We're grieving the youth that we used to have. We're grieving the substance that used to work. We're grieving the relationship that we thought was perfect, but really wasn't. Like, we're constantly grieving the past. And something that I like to really honor when I'm working with people is like, can we grieve that and can we celebrate it fully? Can we celebrate what we had? I drank and used drugs and had a really freaking great time
Yeah,
in a lot of these places,
sure.
right? Like I had a fabulous, glamorous, fun life.
Well, yeah, it was not all bad.
No, and I'm not mad at alcohol. I'm not mad at drugs. I'm not mad at people who still choose to use them. It just stopped working for me.
Mhm.
And so when I'm in deep grief of like, oh, like, I'm also a very big music person. And so, concerts are coming back again right now in September of 2021. And it's like, oh my gosh, like that urge of, or seeing my friends where I can tell they're not really there in the photos online, and I'm just like, fuck yeah, like that looks like so much fun. And I celebrate how well I did it. I'm like, oh my goodness, I did music festivals like so well, like costumes, perfect drugs, perfect like situations, like all the right people, all the right things. And I'll just be in like real celebration of like, oh my God, remember that one time and that was so fun. And then that brings a lightness where I can still grieve it. Like it'll never be like that again for me. I'll never have that kind of experience.
No, it'll be better. It's going to be
Yeah,
better.
exactly. It'll be different. And can different even be okay? Because instead of being like, I can't go because I can't get high, actually, I can go and I can get even more high and remember everything and still talk to all the same people. And like 3/4 of my friends are either sober or getting sober now in the music world. And so I'm just like, awesome, right? Like we can all be high while clean and enjoy the music.
It's about learning to live in a world where it's at and not have to do it ourselves, and I mean, I tell clients this all the time when they're like, oh, I'll never be able to do this again. I'll never be able to do that. I can't ever go to baseball games or I can't ever go to concerts, and that's such a crock of shit because, again, the Grateful Dead was, it is still by far my favorite band. And, from 91 to 95, I off and on went to a lot of concerts, up until Jerry Garcia died, which was a very sad day. And, and of course, a lot of drugs, a lot of LSD, a lot of hallucinogens, a lot of weed, drinking, the Grateful Dead was a lifesaver for me in certain aspects also, because it actually took me away from meth. Yeah. And that was the one that killed me, but they'd hit town and I'd be off and running and I'd get off the meth and, of course, get on a lot of LSD and, those things. Right. But in 2015, they did a reunion show up in Santa Clara. They did 3 shows in Chicago.
I was there.
Did you go to Santa Clara?
Uh-huh. Yeah,
nice.
Totally.
Yeah. So, and it was the greatest thing, it was, I mean, and I think about it, because like I think back, of course, when I was going to the shows, back when Jerry was alive and all that stuff, I don't remember hardly any of them. I mean, I really don't. I mean, little, it's foggy and little pieces here and there. But when I go clean and sober, I can actually remember it. I can feel it. I can enjoy the music, instead of just sitting on the grass and picking, weird things and finding weird bugs on acid, and just wandering off, but I get to actually enjoy the reason I went,
Yeah. Yeah. There's just so many things. And, again, I'm just going to take it back to like when our bodies, our minds are telling us that we're not going to be able to have as much fun and we're not going to be able to enjoy our lives that way. Like it is a protective mechanism to try to keep us in relationship
Mhm.
with that thing.
Mhm.
And so when you can, I mean, if you can hear what I just said, like it's a protective mechanism to keep us in relationship with the meth and the drug of choice rather than going to where you've maybe never been before and being in relationship with yourself more deeply, with your self-confidence, with like
Mhm.
pure fucking joy for the sake of just like joy and pleasure and all of the things that come from this. And it makes sense when it's telling us those things, right? That protective part of us, and this is a big part of the work I do, is telling us, like whispering in our ears, like, well, Amy, how are you ever going to go to a wedding again if you can't drink alcohol? Oh my
Mhm.
gosh, like really, that was one of my concerns. And I'm just like, that was just so silly and so wise of that protective part of me that wanted to keep me drunk and numb and unable to really live in the world the way that I wanted to. And so our minds are very, very tricky and the nervous system wants that path of least resistance. So it is going to tell you every single thing to keep you stuck and safe.
Mhm.
And it's not true. It's not true. None of these things are true, but it takes a strong community. It takes like really being able to talk back to that part of you
Mhm.
and remind that part of you, like what I like to say to that part of me is like, thank you so much for keeping me safe. Thank you so much for everything that you've done to keep me safe until now. I've got it from here. And that's my higher self. That's myself that's connected to things bigger than me. That's just able to finally parent my part in a way to keep us all safe rather than doing weird things to really take me out of consciousness. And, I think again, the Iowa clean, like
Yeah.
experiencing a whole different level of consciousness is
Well, because
you're
see,
high.
yeah, and the thing is that we can even flip that a step further, and say that my drug of choice, I still get high on
Yeah.
adrenaline, dopamine. I mean, those were literally that, and that's what it came to. My realization was that it was the adrenaline and the dopamine. That was my drug of choice. And you know what? I got it.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I remind people of is like we create all of this within ourselves.
Mhm.
And when we feel safe to actually start creating these things through our regular, day-to-day lives, that's when we can feel on purpose. Exhilaration is one of my purpose emotions. I love feeling exhilarated. So I do things to exhilarate myself. I take risks. I'm very vulnerable. And that's exhilarating. And I get the rush. I get the lightheadedness. I get the, oh my God, I think I'm gonna die. And it gets better. And a big part of my practices that I teach are embodiment of pleasure. And there's so much to explore that maybe you never even knew was possible
Mhm.
through our pleasure, like when we can really activate what brings us pleasure and allow ourselves to, because actually experiencing deep levels of pleasure is pretty vulnerable.
Mhm.
And sometimes we're so closed off and so scared that we're not allowing ourselves to really lean into that. And whether it's through food or through nature or through just dancing or music or art or whatever it is, like we have it within us.
So you have a bridge to trust, which
Hmm.
is a 3-day interactive experience. What is that?
Yeah, so it's everything that we've been talking about, really. So I work with a lot of people who have been sober for a really long time, who've worked the steps several times, who aren't really like getting to that next
Mm.
part of their life. And one thing that is missing is just learning how to create that trust that maybe they never had within themselves and in their relationships with their family systems, with their partners, with their friends, with their with the places that they work, all of those places, they just don't really know how to trust and how to be in self-confidence and self-worth, learning how to use their voice, learning how to really show up in the world. And so the Bridge to Trust experience, we just actually had it at the end of August, and it was a 3-day experience of like, what is trust? What does that actually even mean? And where is it ruptured in your life? And how do we repair that so that you can come back to understanding that you're safe to walk through the world and be in your truth
Mhm.
and be vulnerable.
Mhm.
What trust really is for me, and the definition that I use for now, I just opened a new program called Recover the Trust. So it's like, after we build that bridge, then how do we actually recover it? And this happens with our family systems all the time. Like, I don't think I'll ever be able to face that person again. Ooh, yeah, actually you can, because that trust doesn't have anything to do with that other person. It has to do with you.
Mhm.
And can you really truly trust yourself again?
Mhm.
And show up in the world with that, like, I can do this. I'm capable of going to the baseball game or going to the concert or going to Jazz Fest, or whatever it is that you do out there in the world, that you can come back to really understanding your nervous system, understanding what it's like to actually communicate clearly and concisely. So often people don't really know how to ask for their needs to get met.
Mhm.
And so they become the 3-year-old or 5-year-old or 10-year-old version of themselves when they're trying to get their needs met, or don't know how to. Fighting is actually very healthy with your partners, with your family, with your friends. Like, disagreeing is okay, but how do you do it in a healthy way? How do
Mhm.
you apologize in the world, right? And do it in a healthy way. What is a real apology? Those are all the things that we learn together and Recover the Trust. And probably the most freeing thing is really learning the 3 states of your nervous system. And so that you, when you're in one state, to just be like, oh, that totally makes sense. Like, I just don't know how to bring myself down from a fight or flight response,
Right.
or I don't know how to take myself up from a collapsed freeze response.
All
Yeah,
right.
so that's a little bit about what it's about. It's really that next level of, it's all the things that keep us stuck. I mean, I get to work with, I've been working with people all over the world for several years now, and they reach a certain level, and then they just get, like you said, with your recovery, you just got a little stagnant and stale, and you're just like, wait, what do I do next?
Mhm.
And people are like, oh, I'm bored, and all the old things are coming back up. And I'm like, wait. That's not what's actually happening here. There's some unhealed stuff that's getting in the way. You've kind of created your own glass ceiling of sorts, and you're just running into it. And
Yeah.
like, how can we actually learn to trust yourself that you can bust through it?
Yeah, and part of it is, early when you first get clean and sober, you make leaps and bounds. I mean, you do, you're like way down here, and you get clean, and you're kind of moving up fairly quick, to a point to where eventually you hit a point to where, okay, you're not going to be able to make those giant leaps anymore. But as long as you're making steps, no matter how small. I mean, I tell people, all the time that as long as you gain one thing, then it's worth it, you know? So even if it's just minute little steps forward, then you're in the right direction.
Yeah, and so often, like, that if we're only measuring it and from like the steps that we make forward, then there's a tendency, and this happens so often for us, to always think that we're failing. And so again, like, the work that I do in that trauma world and trauma informed world is like, all of your mistakes are giant steps forward too. All of your imperfection is giant steps forward. Like, maybe you don't have to be going fucking forward at all. Like, that you're learning and that you're taking from this, because like, I take risks all the time and I'm like, oh, that didn't really work. And I'm not like beating myself up about it. I'm like, that didn't work. Okay, so now what can I try again? But if I'm only looking up the ladder and not really celebrating all of the things, all the learning and the fumbling around and the not knowing, it's like that staying curious,
Right.
that curiosity of
Well, it's
discovery.
the title of my book. I have a book, Pain, Failure, and Misery Are the Stepping Stones to Success.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and because like, you know, I mean, things have to die in order for them to be recreated, right? And that's often very painful, but there's definitely been different parts of me that I had to be like, I gotta let this part go. And it served me so well, and thank you so much. But it doesn't always mean that it's gonna be enjoyable or pleasurable. But how can I find the pleasure in it anyway? Right? How can I really take every stroke that life gives me? Because that's what signing up for consciousness is.
Right. And it's
Yeah.
all, and a lot of it's based on perspective. How are
Mm.
you viewing things? Is it a problem or is it an opportunity?
Yeah.
I mean, everything, for me, that was a big thing for me, was to kind of change my view of things, look at things very differently. Even my past, I mean, I did a lot of horrible things in my past, going back to my sociopathic nature while on meth. And, but I can look back on it today and be grateful for everything that I went through, because none of it made me who I am, but it did help shape me. And I love who I am today, you know?
Exactly.
So
Absolutely.
it's about reframing. We can kind of reframe, we can change new, we can create new meanings, out of our old past. Because we can't change our past.
No, absolutely not.
All we can do is maybe twist it around, change it to become lessons, to become beneficial for us in some way. And then it's useful to us.
Absolutely. And that's one of the main things that people get stuck in, is trying to change the past or make up for this time lost.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that time lost is an illusion. It really just is, you know, and if we spend 75% of our energy trying to make up for lost time or to do these things, then we're not spending that 75% of our energy like being here now to create something totally different and new.
Because it's not lost.
No, it's not lost at all. It's like the freaking embers for the fire that you can create in your life as a clean and sober human doing things in the world. It's not lost at all.
I mean, all those years that I did all that stuff, that was not lost time. I know exactly where it was.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But then people can catastrophize so quickly that, like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to have that again. And then that catastrophization like leads to a sympathetic like fight flight response. And then they're, oh my goodness, and I've ruined my life. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But the first thing first is like, how do we help the nervous system relax into some safety?
Yeah.
So then we can actually see like, you haven't ruined your life. All those things taught you some shit. And now let's go do something different with all that you learned. If you want to, unless you want to continue, we only have so much energy. And in order to change our pathways, it takes a lot of actual nervous system and brain energy. And so when people are like, after a workshop with me, they're like, oh my God, I slept so good last night. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Because we regroove in your neural pathways. Like this is like your brain's having to work really hard to not just go down that path of making everything wrong and absolute. Staying curious takes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And it's easy to do when we're on a hallucinogen, but it's a little bit harder to open those pathways because they're just like, no, we got to keep safe, we got to keep safe, we've got to keep safe. And like dating's a perfect example of that. People are like, I just want to get into a relationship right away, and I'm like, yeah, and like, you date first, and that takes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
It's okay. Like, like that's what you're here now. You're, as a conscious person choosing sobriety, you can choose a lot differently than the way you dated in the past. And that's one of my favorite things to support people with, is like, it can be different, but it's just going to take a lot more energy for you to not go down those same pathways
Right.
of how you used to show up in your relationships. For sure.
Well, hey, I always like to ask this question to everybody: is if you were to send a message out to people that are struggling, what would you tell them?
Something that I would have loved to have heard while I was recovering is like, it's okay and it makes sense what you're doing.
Mhm.
It's okay and it makes sense. And I would have loved to, that would have just helped me relax. And I would have listened to someone from that place. And so if you're out there and you're like, oh my God, I'm such a blank, 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 and I'm just not doing anything right, like it's okay and it makes sense. And you can choose differently.
I love that. Because I mean, I get it too. And, I mean, that's the funny thing, with drugs, it's like, when I, started drugs, it was giving me all these positive stuff. I mean, it was doing great things for me. It gave me energy, gave me, focus, concentration. I liked myself. At least I felt I liked myself. And it worked, now eventually, of course, it stops working, but it definitely worked at the time.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it makes sense.
It does.
And it's okay. And you can choose differently.
Yes. Well, eventually I had to,
Yeah.
If I wanted to stay
me
high, I had to, I
Yeah.
wanted to stay high. I had to get clean and sober.
Yeah. And just, I know we're going to wrap up soon. It's something that I want to add to this is that if you're out there and you're not at that rock bottom and you still want to stop, like you don't have to, that you can find an inspiration and a motivation, and everything that you're doing makes sense. When you start to understand that you're escaping something, then you have so much more choice from there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it's so possible. You don't have to do like Eric and I did and have to be forced to stop.
Right. There's gotta be a better way,
Oh, there is. And I get to support lots of people to choose differently. And they don't have to reach that bottom. I just talked to 2 old clients today, actually, that were just calling to brag about how fucking awesome their life is. And I was like, oh my God, I'll listen to this all day long. And they didn't have to reach any kind of bottom to do it.
Yeah. They had to reach their own bottom, whatever
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
Well, why don't you give everybody how do they reach you? How would people reach?
So it's really simple. Facebook, Instagram, my website is all Thrive in Recovery with Amy. All one word, Thrive in Recovery with Amy. There's all kinds of different videos that you can watch there and listen to. You can direct message me. And currently in September, we're recording right now in September, I have a container called Recover the Trust, and that's Thrive in Recovery with Amy / Recover the Trust. And it's a group coaching program that will take you on a journey for 5 months to really just do everything that Eric and I talked about in 5 months to really get you to that next level of your life, to experience the self-confidence and the relationships and with money, with intimacy, with sex, with, your every part of your life, with your partners, with your family, and take that to the next level.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on here. I really appreciate this. I love your message. Like I said, I think you and I think very similar in a lot of aspects. Keep doing what you're doing.
You too. Thank you so much for this, and have a great afternoon.
You too. Hey, I want to thank everybody for tuning into another episode of High Wall Clean. And as I always like to say, keep getting high, but let's do it clean. Thanks.
They see